So our first talk that we have in front of us is entitled Resilience, Cybersecurity's Next Frontier. And judging by the results of last week's mock fish, we are probably going to need it. Ladies and gentlemen, our first speaker, please welcome Dr. Anurag Shankar.
Thanks. Good afternoon. I've never been in front of such a big screen, so I hope I can handle this. So I have the distinct pleasure of starting this new format, lightning talks, and I thought that I should probably do something like this to make sure there's some thunder also. But I work for the Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research, and the topic, what I'm going to talk about today is resilience, which is a new movement within cybersecurity that's coming up. And at the risk of feeding Brad's paranoia, I will tell you what is happening. One of my jobs is to check to see what sorts of new threats are coming up. And we have, some of these things are old, but they're kind of, think of the old threats with AI added to it. So we have ghostware, which basically is software that, malware that gets into your system and then does its job and then disappears, and there's absolutely no trace. Then we have morphware. One of the things that people do these days is to run a software or malware in an isolated environment to make sure it doesn't affect anyone else. So now the bad guys are writing software that detects that. It detects whether it's running in such an environment and actually acts benignly, and then when it's out of that environment, then it does its dirty job. So far, the hypervisors in the virtual infrastructure have been relatively safe, but that's also changing. As the attackers get more sophisticated, they're beginning to target that layer. And then mobileware, which is something that I think we're familiar with, people trying to take over our smartphones. The threat surface is widening. We have IoT coming up. We've seen some interesting tests in automobile security. I should probably say planes, though not quite there yet, but you probably remember that guy that claimed that he was able to hack into an airplane's aviation system. So what's happening is systems are getting more complex as more AI and things like that are added. Basically, with that comes fragility. As systems get more complex, they also become fragile. The reality today is that attacks and breaches have become an integral part of the landscape, just like disease for humans. We have spent very large amounts of money over the last many years and have not really achieved a whole lot. The budgets are large, but we're not preventing breaches. And the biggest problem, as Brad said earlier, is, as we say, between the keyboard and the chair. So far, the cybersecurity, I claim, is control-centric. Techie people always think in terms of firewalls and things like that when we hear the word cybersecurity. But we have moved beyond that, or we moved beyond that, and actually still a small fraction have turned to risk-centric thinking, which means that you apply only those controls that need to be applied, and they're applied where they need to be applied. So basically making controls more efficient. But again, despite that, we still have the breaches, as I mentioned in the last slide. So the question is what to do. So people who think about these things said, well, if we have a disease, why don't we view it like medicine views disease, which is it's inevitable, but it's manageable. So out of this basically has grown this movement called resilience. So it's a new mindset that basically, really it's a mindset that fully embraces reality. What that means is it assumes that breaches are a given. So it's no longer that there will be, that there may be breaches, or if you do this and that, then you may prevent breaches. No, the breaches are simply a given. It's a matter of not if, but when. So the focus shifts to the ability to operate in the presence of constant attacks, and hopefully not too many breaches, or breaches that you can handle quickly. So the old controls as well as the risk are still there because they are effective tools. Obviously, you continue to have those. But they're subsumed. They're subsumed here. You do not focus on them anymore. You don't focus on breaches anymore. But as I said, you use the medical approach to handling disease, which means you, again, in disease you have prevention, you have diagnosis, intervention, treatment, and then you do research to inform your future actions. And it's a method that's been tried for a long time, and obviously it's I would claim is true and tried method. So the components of resilience are prevention, which is identify risks, and then you can choose those controls that actually mitigate risks. So this is the risk management part. And then within the risk management framework, you have controls. The emphasis has shifted greatly to detection now, because if you assume that there's going to be breaches and you're going to have constant attacks, then what you need to do is to be able to detect them as quickly as possible and respond to them. And that's more or less how other areas where you have risk deal with it. So routine, I now call it security telemetry. And this is something that's a concept that I think we as IT people need to get quite familiar with, is we're constantly feeding information from logs, network, and so forth into systems such as Splunk and other feeding them into systems like Splunk, but also running IDS and intrusion detection system and the digital loss prevention systems and things like that. Then when you detect something out of the ordinary, then you respond to it as quickly as possible. And not only that, but you automate lots of actions. You get telemetry alerts and you escalate if necessary, but in many cases, you can simply automate these actions, or I should say the people who are beginning to use this are doing that. And obviously, then incident response is a critical part of it, which we have pretty good incident response here. And if you do have breaches, particularly if they involve any sensitive data or regulated data, then you have to know about breach notification. You have to do the breach notification, have that as part of that incident response, which we do. And then DR, of course, being still very important. So just this is in a completely different context, but I think this sums up this approach very well. You determine the risk landscape. You determine what the impact is going to be. You determine how well existing structural controls are set up to respond to the impact, or respond to the threat. And then determine how to boost resilience. You either adapt so there's less impact, or you add the ability so you can absorb that impact, or you simply transform to a completely new system that just deals with it. So we're talking about decisions here. So this actually affects decisions that we make. So one of the things that I do is to ensure that some of our systems in UITS satisfy the HIPAA security rule. This is a cyber compliance. And so to do that, we have built basically a risk management framework, which we're converting into a resilience framework, which uses a cybersecurity standard to do risk management, which is based on NIST. We have very good detection that we ensure that these systems have. We have our IDS. We now have Splunk, so we're sending this to Splunk. Really every system should be doing that at this point, but certainly systems with sensitive data. And then we have scripts on many of these systems. We have automated actions. Some of you probably know about this, especially if you've had any anomalous activities and find your system isolated from the network. And you have escalation, and we have a very excellent incident response, which is to email this address. And from that point on, it's an incident response team and a playbook that takes care of it. So this is my last slide. So as we go forward and we are making decisions about how to secure our systems, now we are doing this currently for some systems which have sensitive data, as I said. But there isn't any reason why we shouldn't make these same decisions for every system that we have. Within UITS, we are the keeper. Basically, we have the keys to the kingdom, so to speak. We have all the institutional data that we're basically trusted with. And so I think at this point, every group should have very excellent detection in their systems built into that system. So we have Splunk, or use Splunk. IDS is fortunately working all the time, so we will hear from UISO in case there's any issues there. And have alerting also. Have something where you get an alert, and either you have automated actions that take place, or at least there's an alert to the sysadmins and basically gets escalated as necessary. And it's also important in the compliance work that I do, is often we work with a set of best practices which are somewhat arbitrarily defined. So in the work that I do, what I've realized is that using a cybersecurity standard is rather useful, because you no longer have that ambiguity. NIST 800-53, which is a very large catalog of controls, has about 1,000 controls in it. If you put that catalog of controls in front of you and you go through it, you can see that you're not missing any of the controls, whether you have them or not.
Thank
so
you.
With this,
Thank you, Anurag.
Yeah.